In this video, I'll show you how to learn anatomy so thoroughly that you'll be able to draw any pose from any angle from imagination. I'll give you exercises that will both build and test your knowledge of anatomy. This method isn't easy, but if you get good at the exercises in this video, it will be literally impossible for you to be bad at anatomy. You might be wondering, why learn anatomy the hard way? Why not learn anatomy the easy way? And to that, I say get out of my classroom with your weak attitude. I'm kidding. Kind of. This video is for artists who want to put in the work to get really good at anatomy in the long term. If you want to learn anatomy as fast as possible, or you want it to be easy, this isn't the video for you. A lot of artists ask, how long does it take to learn anatomy? But that's the wrong question. A better question is, how good at anatomy do I want to get? Because anatomy is not something you learn once and then check off your list. It's a skill that you can keep improving for as long as you're drawing. Easier methods of learning anatomy are based on learning simplifications. These are useful, and you can get decent at anatomy by just learning simplifications alone, but if you want to get really good, you should learn the real anatomy that those simplifications are based on. The artists who created those simplifications, like Andrew Loomis, had a deep understanding of anatomy, and their simplifications are much more useful if you do too. What does real anatomical skill look like? To me, it means having an understanding of anatomical structures as 3D forms and knowing how they connect and move. The ultimate test of anatomical knowledge is the Eccorche from imagination, a drawing of a figure as if the skin were transparent, showing the skeleton and muscles underneath. To do this convincingly, you need a deep, three-dimensional understanding of anatomical structures and how they connect. Understanding anatomical structures as three-dimensional forms means having a mental model of their volume, not just understanding them as flat symbols. With this understanding, we can draw the structure from any angle and have it look three-dimensional. These are the building blocks of anatomical knowledge. We need to be able to draw forms from imagination to do this. I explain how to draw forms and build three-dimensional mental models in my video on form. It's important to have a grasp on basic fundamental drawing skills, such as observation, proportion, and form, before attempting to study anatomy. If your fundamental skills are shaky, you'll struggle with both anatomy and your fundamentals while you study, which will ultimately slow you down. I know this from experience, and yeah, don't do what I did. A good way to know if you're ready to study anatomy is to draw an anatomical model from observation. If you can't draw it believably yet, you need to work on your fundamental drawing skills more before you can take on anatomy. To learn anatomical forms three-dimensionally, we need to study three-dimensional sources. We can use digital 3D models in apps. My favorite is 3D Anatomy for the Artist from Catfish Animation Studio. We'll use the same technique that we used to build mental models of objects in the form video. To summarize, I draw the anatomical form from imagination at a specific angle. Then, I use the 3D model to check my work and correct any errors. The more you repeat this process, the more accurate and complete your mental model of the anatomical form becomes. For the large bones, it makes sense to study their forms individually, but for many of the smaller bones, it makes more sense to study them in groups. For example, you don't need to learn the form of every rib. Instead, focus on the form of the rib cage as a whole. We'll start by studying the skeleton. Beginners often focus on the muscles and ignore the skeleton. I get it, muscles are cool, and they're near the surface, but it's the skeleton that gives the figure its form. Muscles attach to the skeleton, so if you know the forms of the skeleton and the attachments of the muscles, you'll know exactly where to place the muscles. Without understanding the skeleton, you'll only have a surface-level understanding of the muscles. As we learn anatomical forms, we can also learn how they connect and move. This includes where bones connect at joints, the structure of those joints and how they move, and the attachment of muscles. I have all this information in my book, Imaginative Drawing, and you can download it for free at imaginativedrawing.com. However, memorizing anatomical information from a textbook is not much fun, and I don't find it very effective either. Instead, we can learn anatomical information by putting it into practice in exercises, such as Eccorche. Eccorche is a figure drawing where the skin is transparent, so the bones and muscles underneath are visible. These studies can be done from a live model, photo reference, the figurative work of master artists, or imagination. An Eccorche is like a puzzle, where we use the forms that we can see on the surface and our knowledge of anatomy to figure out the rest of the anatomical information. If we know the forms of the anatomical structures and where they connect, we can figure out how the anatomy deeper beneath the surface will fit together. If we don't have that information memorized yet, we can use reference as we work. This way, we're learning the anatomical information in the context that we'll be using it. I'll start with a gesture just to establish the basic shapes and proportions and forms, so that I don't have to think about that and anatomy at the same time while I'm doing the Eccorche. Next, I'll focus on bone landmarks. This is areas where the bones are close to the skin. I'll start with the clavicles and the sternum because they're close to the skin, making them easier to spot, and they define the forms of the torso well. Normally, I wouldn't draw red lines over the model like this. I'm doing this to show you the forms that I recognize at the surface. But you can trace over the photo like this when you study if you find it helps. The knee is another place where the bones are close to the surface. I can see the head of the femur, the head of the tibia, and the patella. And I'll draw those in. The front of the tibia is near the surface as well, so I can see that and draw that in, as well as the malleolus of the tibia at the ankle and the lateral malleolus of the fibula. At the elbow, I can see the olecranon of the ulna and the epicondyles of the humerus. And I'll draw those in there. That will give me an idea of where my humerus is. Then I can fill in the rest based on my knowledge of the bone's form. Same thing on the other side. I can see the ulna on the outside of the arm running from the elbow to the wrist. Now that I've found my bone landmarks, where the bones are close to the surface, I can use those and my knowledge of the forms of bones to draw the rest of the skeleton. I can find the rest of the rib cage. The skull is mostly close to the surface, so that's not too challenging to figure out if I know the forms of the skull. The pelvis is a bit trickier. There's not that much that's visible at the surface from this angle. I can find the anterior of the iliac crest, the anterior iliac superior spine. That's a pretty prominent landmark, but the rest of it I have to kind of guess. I can find the pubis by following the center line of the body, because that's where it will be even if I can't see it. The head of the femur fits into the acetabulum of the pelvis, so finding the rest of the femur and the greater trochanter helps me place the pelvis as well. Since I know where the knee and the pelvis are, I can figure out the rest of the femur. Once I have the pelvis, the ribcage, and the skull, I'll know where to put the spine. And I'm just going to use a modified cylinder for that. I don't need to worry about the individual vertebrae in an Eccorche like this. I'll draw the hands and the feet. There's a lot of small bones in there, and at this distance I won't be able to get all of them. On the foot, I have the calcaneus, the heel bone, and the tarsus, and then the metatarsals. Now that I have the skeleton, I can draw the muscles based on my knowledge of where muscles attach and what I can see on the surface of the figure. I can see the forms of the triceps pretty well, so I'll draw those in there. Then on the forearm, I know that the extensor group is on the back of the forearm. Draw that in there. I can see that the deltoid attaches to the clavicle and the humerus. The pectoralis attaches to the sternum, the clavicle, the rib cage, and then to the humerus. On the neck, I can see the trapezius on the top of the torso and the back, and the sternocleidomastoid that attaches the sternum and the clavicle to the mastoid process. Get all those little muscles on the face in there. The rectus abdominis connecting to the bottom of the ribcage and the top of the pelvis. On the front of the leg, the quadriceps attached to the pelvis and upper femur, and to a tendon that attaches to the patella. On the side of the leg, the adductor group attaches to the pelvis and then to the tibia. The sartorius wraps between the quadricep and the adductor group. In the lower leg, the gastroc attaches to the back of the femur, which you can't see, and then wraps down most of the lower leg. It gives a big bulge there for the heel muscle. On the front, we have the tibialis from the tibia to the ankle. And then there's some little muscles in there as well. And that's a general idea of what I'm doing in an Eccorche and what I'm thinking as I draw this. Drawing the nude model is essential to learning anatomy, As obvious as it sounds, to learn to draw humans, you have to draw humans. During figure drawing, you'll learn to recognize the anatomical structures that you're studying in real life. Figure drawing builds your visual memory of what humans really look like, including bodies in a variety of shapes and sizes, not just the idealized forms in anatomy books. Drawing from a live model is best. You're likely to find figure drawing sessions open to the public at your local art school or figure drawing club. There are many approaches to figure drawing, from 30-second gestures to multi-hour studies. I recommend trying a variety of approaches because they each have their own benefits and drawbacks. Let's put this anatomical knowledge into action and draw everybody's favorite jacked character, Goku. I'll start by drawing the shapes and figuring out the general pose. I'm thinking of anatomy at this point, but I'm also thinking about the shapes and the design and making sure the drawing looks good from a design standpoint, because there's more to making a good drawing than getting the anatomy correct. In this demo, I'm going to start with an Eccorche from imagination to show you the anatomy that I would be thinking about when I'm doing this drawing. If I wasn't doing this as a demo, I wouldn't draw the Eccorche out completely like this. This would all just be in my head. But drawing it out lets you see what I'm thinking when I'm making the design. But you can do an Eccorche from imagination to figure out the pose if that helps you. I'll establish the skull. Now for the arms, I'll do the humerus. And from this angle, let's see the ulna, and then the radius would be behind that, then get the fingers in there. Then on the other side, same thing. Figure out the fingers. Now I'll do the pelvis. And the femurs from the trochanter down the shaft to the knee. And the patella, same thing on the other side. The malleoli with the fibula on the outside and the tibia on the inside. Then I'll do the foot, but I won't get too detailed because it's going to be in a boot anyway. And most of the back leg is going to be hidden anyway. And now I can tweak things, maybe change the tibia a little bit. And I'll bring the other leg out a little bit more. And now that I have my skeleton, I can figure out where the muscles are. Again, if I were doing this not as a demo, I would just have this in my mind. So I'll start with the upper body, using my knowledge of attachments to figure out where these muscles should start and end. Let's raise up the head a little bit. Yeah, give it more of a neck. Pectorals, abdominals. We have the serratus anterior, and that interdigitates with the obliques. Now for the legs, I'll do the quads. They're on the front, you can see them. And a little bit of the abductors behind them. The sartorius divides the quads and the abductors, then the lower leg muscles. Now I'll start drawing the character using what I know about anatomy and the muscles. This is where I would have started after the gesture if I wasn't doing this as a demo, instead of using the Eccorche. The Eccorche represents the anatomical knowledge that's in my mind as I draw the bones and muscles of the character. Here, I'm focusing not just on getting the anatomy right, but also designing the shapes so it looks appealing. Because like I said, there's more to a good drawing than getting the anatomy correct. And the rest is just cleaning it up, coloring it, giving it that polish that makes it look better, giving it a light source, that sort of thing. Learning anatomy the hard way works because it's grounded in reality. It's based on observing real people in 3D models, not flat diagrams. It builds a three-dimensional understanding of anatomy, not just names and concepts. And it uses exercises that build and test your knowledge, not just route memorization. I go into more detail on anatomy and other drawing fundamentals in my book, Imaginative Drawing. This is the textbook to my Drawing Fundamentals class in animation school, but you can download it for free at imaginativedrawing.com. I plan to make more videos covering drawing exercises, so subscribe to make sure you don't miss those. If you want to learn more about drawing fundamentals, check out this video here. I'm trying to take the art instruction I do in the classroom and bring it to the internet so I can help more people. If that's something you believe in, then help me get the word out. Like and share this video, share the book with someone you think would benefit from it, or just leave a comment and make fun of the way I look, because I think that's funny. Thanks for watching, and happy drawing!